You're floating in open water, miles from any coastline. Something the size of a school bus is gliding straight towards you. Every instinct in your body says swim. Your legs don't move. Your heart slams once, twice, and then, strangely, starts to settle. For the next 10 minutes, this enormous stranger is going to save your life, though you won't understand why until it's already over. This isn't a story someone made up to sell tickets. It's exactly what happened to marine biologist Nan Hauser in September of 2017 in the waters off the Cook Islands. A 50,000-pound humpback whale swam directly at her, nudged her with its head, tucked her beneath its pectoral fin, and pushed her through the water again and again. Its skin brushed hers, rough as old rope, barnacles scraping her arm with every roll. She had spent 28 years diving alongside whales. She had never once seen behavior like this. For a moment, she was certain it was about to kill her. She was wrong. Only after it finally released her near the boat did she notice what had been circling the entire time. An 18-foot tiger shark, arched and coiled in attack position. The whale hadn't been threatening her. It had been hiding her. Here's where the story turns strange. Marine biologist Robert Pittman has documented this same pattern in humpback whales for years, and not only toward humans. In 2009, Pittman photographed a humpback lifting a Weddell seal straight out of the water and onto its own chest, holding the seal above the surface until a pod of hunting orcas finally gave up and swam away. The seal wasn't the whale's kin. It wasn't even the same order of mammal. Scientists have a name for this kind of behavior: interspecific altruism, which just means helping across species lines with no clear reward. Pittman has watched it happen dozens of times. Why would a wild predator risk itself for a creature it has no relationship with at all? And whales are far from the only ones doing this. A wild raven once perched on a fence for over an hour, refusing to leave, calling out until someone finally stepped outside to see what was wrong. 4 porcupine quills were buried in its face. It sat completely still and let a total stranger pull them out, one at a time. A fox in Colorado once walked calmly onto a family's porch with a plastic jar wedged so tightly over its head that it couldn't possibly have removed it alone, and it let them work the jar free without a single struggle. A herd of wild deer, exhausted from swimming across the freezing waters of an Alaskan passage, swam straight toward a fishing boat instead of away from it. Elephants have been filmed doing something even stranger, deliberately leading rangers step by step to a calf trapped at the bottom of a well, waiting and watching until the digging finally begins. None of these animals were pets. None of them had a single personal reason to believe a human would help. So why did they believe it anyway? The pattern gets even harder to explain once you look at Laguna, a small coastal town in southern Brazil. For more than 140 years, wild bottlenose dolphins there have worked alongside local fishers, herding schools of mullet through murky water towards the shore. Written records of the partnership go back more than a century, including a 19th century letter describing these same dolphins already at work long before any scientist thought to ask why. When a dolphin dives at just the right moment, it's a signal. The fishers cast their nets on cue, and the dolphins eat the fish that scatter free. Biologist Fabio Daura Jorge and his colleagues spent over a decade studying this partnership and found something remarkable. It isn't instinct alone, it's culture. Fishers learn to recognize individual dolphins by name. Dolphin mothers appear to teach the practice to their calves. Neither species is forced into this. Both sides simply keep choosing it, generation after generation, the same way a human tradition gets passed down at a dinner table. That's not an animal being rescued. That's a wild predator choosing an ongoing, working relationship with your species and keeping it alive across generations without a single contract or leash involved. For decades, the leading explanation for any of this was domestication. Animals that live alongside humans for generation after generation slowly evolve to trust them. The theory goes, the same way a dog trusts you and a wolf doesn't. In the 1950s, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev decided to test that idea directly. Exiled to Siberia during a period when genetics research could get a scientist arrested, he began breeding wild silver foxes using one rule only. Only the calmest, least fearful foxes around humans were allowed to reproduce. Nothing else about them was selected, not size, not color, just comfort around people. Within 20 generations, something happened that Belyaev never bred for on purpose. The fox's ears went floppy, their tails curled upward, their faces softened into rounder, almost childlike shapes. They started to look unmistakably like dogs. Belyaev had accidentally triggered what scientists now call domestication syndrome, a whole cascade of physical changes that seems to switch on automatically whenever a species is bred for tolerance instead of fear. It's the same pattern visible in dogs compared to wolves and in farmyard cattle compared to their wild ancestors. Evolutionary anthropologist Hare at Duke University took Belyaev's foxes and asked an uncomfortable question. What if this didn't only happen to animals? What if it happened to your own species too? Hare's research, developed with longtime collaborators Richard Wrangham and Michael Tomasello, suggests that somewhere around 50,000 years ago, something shifted in early humans. The individuals who were calmer, more tolerant of strangers, and less quick to violence began quietly outcompeting the ones who weren't. Not the strongest humans, not even the smartest. The friendliest. Look at human skulls from 50,000 years ago and you'll find heavy brow ridges and long, rugged faces. Look at skulls from 20,000 years later and the shift is obvious. Shorter, rounder, softer, written in bone the same way Belyaev watched it get written into fur. Over thousands of generations, tolerance for unfamiliar people climbed high enough to build trade routes, cities, and cooperation between total strangers who might once have been enemies. Hare calls it self-domestication. You are, in a very real sense, a wolf that learned to walk into the firelight instead of staying in the dark. But here's the twist that breaks the theory wide open. Humpback whales were never domesticated. Wild ravens were never bred for calmness. The dolphins of Laguna were never fenced, farmed, or selectively bred by anyone. Domestication syndrome cannot explain what any of them are doing because by definition, it doesn't apply to them. So something older than domestication has to be at work here. Something that has nothing to do with fur, faces, or farms at all. Researchers studying dogs and wolves raised in identical conditions found a small but telling difference between them. Give a dog a puzzle it physically cannot solve, and within seconds it stops, turns, and looks directly at a nearby human's face, almost like it's asking for help. Give a wolf raised by the very same humans from birth the exact same unsolvable puzzle, and it won't look back at all. It just keeps struggling, alone every time. That single glance turns out to be one of the clearest behavioral signs of an animal that has evolved to read humans as a resource instead of a threat. And that glance isn't limited to dogs. Domestic horses turn toward people and hold eye contact when they're stuck. Even wild red junglefowl chicks, the untamed ancestors of chickens, have been recorded seeking contact with a nearby human during a task they couldn't solve alone. There's a real biological mechanism sitting underneath all of this too. Animal behaviorist Miho Nagasawa found that when a dog stares into its owner's eyes, both of their oxytocin levels rise together, in a loop, the same hormone that bonds a mother to a newborn. Look, bond, trust, repeat. It isn't a metaphor, it's a hormone doing precisely what evolution built it to do in two different species at the same time. Which raises the real question underneath everything so far. Maybe trust between species was never something humans invented and slowly taught to animals one at a time. Maybe it's a channel that was always open, built out of hormones and instincts far older than any farm or fireplace, just waiting for the right signal to move through it in either direction. You use that exact channel constantly, whether you notice it or not. Psychologists Alexander Todorov and Janine Willis found that people judge a stranger's face as trustworthy or threatening in about 1/10 of a second, faster than you could consciously form the word stranger. Giving yourself more time to look barely changes the verdict. Your ancestors needed that split-second read to survive encounters with strangers from rival groups, back when guessing wrong could be fatal. That same ancient circuitry, the one that decides friend or threat in a heartbeat, may be the very thing a wild raven leaned on when it decided your hands, not its own wing, were its best chance. Think about how strange your ordinary day actually is because of that same circuitry. You let a stranger in a uniform into your home during an emergency. You give directions to someone you'll never see again, expecting nothing back. You board a plane and trust a pilot you've never met with your life, surrounded by hundreds of other strangers doing the exact same thing. No other species on the planet extends that kind of baseline trust to genetic strangers as a default setting. And it isn't some quirk of modern life. It's the same tolerance Hare traced back 50,000 years, just wearing a different uniform. It might be the same thing a Laguna dolphin reads in the particular fisher it has worked beside for years. And the same thing that first distant ancestor of your dog read in the humans camped at the edge of the firelight, long before anyone called it a dog at all. That's what makes Hauser's whale so hard to wave away as a fluke. Nothing had trained it to trust her. Nothing had raised it beside her. In the space of a few seconds, it read something in her, something that said, "This creature in the water is not a threat and might even be worth protecting." And it acted on that read immediately. That is the same read you perform on strangers constantly, usually without ever noticing you're doing it. So the next time something enormous moves straight toward you in open water, or a wild animal turns to look you directly in the eye instead of running, don't just call it luck. Somewhere behind that stare is 50,000 years of the exact same experiment, playing out in a different body on a coastline you may never visit. A creature deciding, in an instant, that you might be safe. And this time, you weren't even the one who proved it. You've been running that same experiment your entire life, on every stranger you've ever met, without ever once giving it a name until now.